for now, I just want to say welcome again to everyone and happy Earth Day. So thank you all for coming to Watershed Management Group's virtual invasive species workshop with the one and only Trevor Hare that we've got with us today, our restoration director. So just a bit of an introduction to who we are and who WMG is. Watershed Management Group is a nonprofit organization based here in Tucson. Our mission is to develop community-based solutions to ensure the long-term prosperity of people and the health of the environment. This is one of our River Run Network events. So I'll change my screen. And I'll talk a little bit more about the River Run Network, but we also wanted to know how long you all have been in the River Run Network. So I've got a poll question for you. So I'll launch that and just keep talking so you all can fill that out. So the River Run Network is a program within Watershed Management Group. And it's a group of people working together to restore Tucson's heritage of flowing creeks and rivers. The network started in 2016 and has grown to over 2,200 members. And the River Run Network organizes free events for these members, such as creek walks, which is something that I can change. There we go. And creek walks are just a great way to get out and see the beauty of Tucson. These organized events help you to explore different areas in Tucson that you may not have seen before. So it's just a great experience. At the moment, they are limited to about 10 people, but it's still a great opportunity to get out and enjoy nature, especially right now when it is getting a little warmer, but it's still kind of nice outside. Everything is blooming. I apologize if I sneeze during this event. It's because everything is blooming. So yeah. We also organized, I think I skipped one. Oh no. There we go, restoration workshops. Sorry, it's a little bit out of order. Our restoration projects are another organized event through this program. It's also limited to small groups at the moment, but it's still a great way to do some on the ground work. These photos are from a recent workshop in Cienega Creek Nature Preserve, and you can see Trevor in one of those photos as well. They were creating moonwalk dams and structures called Zuni bowls. So it's just a great way to really learn about our environment and just a great way to help to restore that area. We're gonna go back here to river cleanups. River cleanups are something that we've also been doing during the time of COVID-19. We've organized events in person and grouped events, as well as dispersed events where our members go out in their own areas to pick up trash along the rivers. These events definitely help to clean up not only the area around you, but also the rivers as a whole. Can you all see my PowerPoint okay? You can see the photos? Yes. Okay. Okay. Now we're going back here. There we go. So through the River Run Network, we also have a community science program called Flow 365. The 50-year vision of this network is to see the rivers flow again in Tucson. And so through the Flow 365 program, you can help track the flow of our rivers and see those changes that are happening in response to our restoration efforts. This data is something that hasn't been collected before, and we're really excited to be able to see the changes happening in our rivers over the years through this program. This program has periodic virtual training sessions, actually one coming up in May. If you're interested in joining, you can find that on our website. And we also will be doing physically distant site visits to help the volunteers at their sites once they go through that training.
We also monitor groundwater levels through the Flow 365. So if anybody lives in a shallow groundwater area and has a well on their property, we want to talk to you.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Trevor, for that. And so throughout this time, we have just seen an amazing participation from our awesome members, and we're glad to have you all here with us today. So I'm going to end that polling and see There we go. So there's quite a few of you that this is your first event, so welcome. And there's a few of you that have been here for a little bit, so thank you all again. We are so excited to have you all here. And now we can get started with Trevor.
Will you take me back to the first slide, please?
That one? I was going to ask you about this map, Trevor.
So, well, the map in a second. So Dominica just asked in the chat, what is considered a shallow well? So Tucson, the Tucson Basin and Pima County and Pima Associations of Governments has mapped what they call shallow groundwater areas. And those are areas where groundwater is still within 50 or 60 feet of the surface. And you'll know those areas because they have cottonwood trees. So the upper Tanque Verde, Sabino Creek, a portion of the Santa Cruz downtown, parts of the upper Canada del Oro system, Cienega Creek. And we like those areas because if we do work in those areas to infiltrate more water, slow, sink and spread the flow, or slow, spread and sink the flow, we see a response in groundwater levels much faster than we would if we were sinking and slowing flows in Midtown Tucson, where it's 200 feet to the water table. So you can get on our website and take a look at our interactive map on the River Run Network page, and it has all those areas delineated. And yeah, if you own land or have a well on your property in one of these shallow groundwater areas, we want to talk to you, because we can actually see a rise in groundwater levels based on stormwater flows, based on precipitation events. So it's really cool stuff. So I'll jump into this. So this map I stole off the Desert Museum's website this morning because Lauren just put a picture of me there and I didn't like that. But this just shows occurrence of buffle grass in the Tucson Basin. And this is all self-reported by citizens. And you'll notice there's kind of a hole right in the middle of Tucson where we are. Watershed Management Group's Living Lab and Learning Center is at Speedway and Dodge. And when I got into the office just a little bit ago and got this set up, I walked out and voila, there's buffle grass. There is buffle grass everywhere, along all of our washes, along all of our roadways, throughout the Tucson Basin. So it's a big problem. And I'll talk about that right now. You want to forward on. And so we have our big three right now. And this is my big three. Two are the biggest threats right now, buffle grass and stinknet. I add African sumac onto that because I hate that tree. It is invading really terribly into our wash systems, especially in the Tucson mountains, but throughout the Tucson Basin. So I have put it in my big three. I've got a couple other ones that I don't like also, but these are the ones that I consider the biggest problems. So let's talk about buffle grass. So, you know, a non-native African grass native to South Africa. It was introduced into the US along with a bunch of other non-native grass species as forage and erosion control in the 1930s. Of course, in the 1930s, we had the Dust Bowl going on, a long drought. And some of these African grasses are really adapted to growing in disturbed areas and growing with very, very little amounts of water. It was kind of a knee-jerk reaction on behalf of the Soil Conservation Service and the US Department of Agriculture, because we've got plenty of native grasses out there for cows to eat and to hold soil together. What happened in the late 1800s, early 1900s is the ranges were all severely overgrazed. We had tons of mortality of whole grasslands. And so instead of sowing native grasses back into the landscape, these misguided individuals, who I won't name because I don't know who they are, started sowing these non-native African grasses. And turns out buffle grass is the worst of them all. It's very large, it grows really quickly, doesn't need a lot of water, and it carries fire into ecosystems that are not fire adapted. So we live in the Sky Island region here, surrounded by mountains, desert grasslands, and desert scrub. Well, the desert grasslands and the mountains are all fire adapted ecosystems. The Sonoran desert scrub is not a fire adapted ecosystem, and we saw this last year with the big fire in the Catalinas burning all the way down and killing saguaros, where generally fire never occurs. So it's a big, big deal. And Pima County has recognized that. They started the Buffle Grass Coordinating Council about 15 years ago. That has now been taken over by the Desert Museum, and the Desert Museum is just doing a wonderful job of educating people, getting people out to do buffle grass removals, especially in Tucson Mountain Park, saguaro east and west. The whole front range of the Catalinas is infested with this grass. So there's a lot of opportunities to get out with like-minded folks and learn how to identify and pull buffle grass. But as I mentioned, it's all over Midtown too. And I know what it looks like. And there are native grasses, really important native grasses that are similar to it. So if you think you have buffle grass, please go onto the Desert Museum's website, and they have a great identification guide. And you'll actually have to get down and really take a close look at these guys. They have pretty unique, and you're not going to be able to see what I'm talking about, but it's a very messy looking grass when it's this size. It's got very reddish stems, but it's got hairy little nodes on it. And I won't be able to show you on this, I don't think, what a node is, unless I go like that. So I don't think that's focusing, but it has a hairy little node. So I encourage people to get rid of buffle grass in their neighborhoods, but make sure you know which is which when you're doing that. So unfortunately, a lot of these species are so widespread and in such inaccessible places, they do use herbicides on it. I do not like spraying herbicides, but to get rid of this buffle grass and some of the other ones like Stinknet and some others that I'll talk about later, we have to spray pesticides, herbicides on them. We have to get rid of this grass out of the Sonoran Desert, or it's just going to burn down the Sonoran Desert. We're going to lose our saguaros. So it's a really big deal. Right now, the Desert Museum is in the middle of their Save Our Saguaros month. So again, I encourage you all to check out the Desert Museum's website on buffle grass. Let's go to the next slide. So just some close-up photos of what it looks like. And again, you know, it's kind of got that reddish hue to it. As the stems start drying out, they also become red. But then you can see on the picture on the left, a really dried seed head is just tan. So you need to have that identification guide, get out in the field, make sure you know which one is what, and start pulling them out. They are super easy to dig out of the ground. They are a short-lived perennial plant. However, they don't put down really deep roots. So they're really easy to dig out. And the most common way to do this is with a garbage bag, because you don't want to start spreading seeds around by carrying it around like I just did when I carried it into the office from outside. Put it in a garbage bag, throw it in the garbage is the best way to do it immediately. Next slide, please. And there's kind of an overview of what it looks like. Seed heads are gone off of this. There may be some seed heads down in the thicker portion, but those portions that are sticking up with the black top in the background, you can see have lost their seed heads, but just a really messy, ugly looking grass. And again, please, yeah, the one grass that has a very similar, we have a question on, is there another grass that looks like this? Ceteria, which I'm forgetting, I think it's a blue stem or a yellow stem, something like that, but Ceteria, and I can't remember the species specific name, just the genera name, Ceteria. So yeah, I just encourage people to really pay attention or learn what that thing looks like. Oh, here's somebody, let's see, questions here. Right, yeah, do not put it in your yard debris bin. Don't put it in your compost unless you're diligently making sure that compost is being turned and heated up. Put it in a garbage bag and throw it in the trash. And then Sue says, I've used a homemade herbicide. Yeah, I think those have been tested down here, and I think they don't work on the buffle grass. But I want to follow up with our friends at the Desert Museum if they've been, I'm sure they've been looking at that. So I'm going to make a note here. So before we move on to the next species, I'll just mention again, the Desert Museum and the Sonoran Desert Weed Whackers are organizing bubble grass pulls weekly, if not a bunch or a couple of them a week. So again, I encourage you to check that out. There's also, if you work for a land management or wildlife management agency and would like to learn more about efforts about this, there is the Sonoran Desert Cooperative Weed Management Area. It's a new group. Cooperative weed management areas have been instituted around the United States to control different weeds in different regions. In about 3 years, the Desert Museum started up our Sonoran Desert Cooperative Weed Management Area. So they've been great finding resources, doing mapping. They also have an early detection and rapid response team. The Audubon Society now has a crew of certified applicators to take care of buffle grass infestations. So everybody's getting in on the game, and it's really probably it's the nastiest non-native we have in Tucson, and we need to deal with it now.
Definitely, for sure. There is another question in the chat, Trevor. Do you know of anyone that provides assistance with buffle grass removal on private property?
Yeah, I think any landscaping company, well, not any landscaping companies, but some landscaping companies definitely know about this, have people who can positively identify it and remove it. On public property, like I did in my neighborhood, I live right by Reed Park, and I saw some in the alleyway between where the old John Jacobs El Parador was, on that empty lot there at Treat and Broadway. There was a whole bunch of buffle grass. I reported that to the city, and within a week they had come in and taken it all out. The county also has an online reporting portal, so we can share those links with everybody. I forgot to put them in the PowerPoint where we have other links.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, so let's go on to this next one, please. So Stinknet just is appearing in the Tucson Basin. 2 years ago, it took over the Phoenix Valley, and there was nothing but Stinknet everywhere. They were out competing all the native wildflowers. You know, we had a really wet winter 2 winters ago, and this just started taking off in the Phoenix area and basically crowded out all the native wildflowers. And while it's kind of a pretty little yellow flower there, it is highly invasive, completely crowds out all our native plants, and has now got a foothold along I-10 in Tucson. Again, another one of those plants that has a whole bunch of people working on it, especially the Sonoran Desert Weed Whackers. Native to South Africa. Leaves are kind of carrot-like, and we'll show a picture of that. And they have a very strong odor to the leaves. And then the flowers are bright yellow and ball-shaped, as you can see there. It's flowering now. It started in late February. luckily with kind of the really dry winter, it hasn't moved too much around Tucson, but there are still big infestations. The way they do this, I mean, they do use herbicides on this, but in small patches, it's just getting in there, keeping an eye on it, digging it out. You'll probably have to dig it out again next year, but after a couple, 3 or 4 times digging it out, you'll deplete the seed bank and get rid of it. But if you just leave it unchecked, and this was directly from the Native Plant Society, the Arizona Native Plant Society, if the Stinknet is allowed to spread for 2 years, manual removal becomes impossible. There's just too much of a seed bank in there. I think we have this picture again on the next slide, but you can see on the flower there, every one of those little tiny spheroids or whatever it is a seed. So there's probably 300 seeds on each one of those little flowers. And so once that seed bank is established, herbicides are going to be the only way you can get rid of it, unfortunately. And I will look at Dr. Zach Bush's work. Please, if I just Google that, will that pop right up, Chris? And Mike asked, how long had Stinknet been in Phoenix before it started to spread rapidly? I don't know that, and I'm not sure the people up there exactly know that, because they didn't notice it right away, because it was widely spread out and it wasn't very thick, and it was just a couple years into it, which is probably 5 years ago, that they really started noticing it taking over. And then after those 2 wet winters of 3 and 2 years ago, that's when they really got concerned about it and started working on it. The Arizona Native Plant Society started putting the news out to its members throughout the state, and almost immediately was found along I-10 at Prince Road by John Shearing with the Arizona Native Plant Society, and he sounded the alarm. Pima County has really picked up the alarm and is working diligently on mapping and eradicating the Stinknet where they can find it. But I have found it here near the Living Lab. I have found it in my neighborhood, so it's spreading around. Oh, good. So there's a link for the Zach Bush studies on Roundup, and I look forward to looking at that. So Sheila asks, are certain areas of Tucson and Pima County more prevalent for Stinknet than others? So like many of these species, they're vectored by roadways. So that's how they're getting around. Both the buffle grass and the Stinknet are attaching themselves, the seeds are attaching themselves to tires, to mud that's on your car, and it's being spread up and down roadways, highways, streets, and getting into the neighborhoods that way. Unlike some of the other stuff that is spreading via water flows through some of our arroyos, such as African sumac and fountain grass. So yeah, it's really along the roads. So, you know, we're encouraging everybody to get out this Saturday and Sunday, walk your neighborhood, walk your community, walk your favorite wash, and keep your eyes out for this. And also both the city and the county have reporting portals on their websites. So if you just type in report Stinknet in Tucson, both Pima and City of Tucson reporting portals will pop right up. The smell is a little stinky, Marty. It's very distinctive. Let's go to the next slide just for some more pictures here.
Do you know what it smells like, Trevor?
Stinky.
Okay.
So there it is before it flowered. This is in February. Again, carrot-like leaves. So pretty distinct out there. There's not very many plants, native plants that look like this. So pretty easy to spot even without the flowers. And then of course, once it flowers, it's really easy to spot. Go to the next slide, please. And there it is. And again, you can see kind of how they're built, and each one of those little nodes contains seeds. So they're pumping out a lot of seeds. They put on a lot of seed heads. It doesn't take a lot of water for them. and just a big problem. Lots of information on the web about this stuff, so I encourage people again. Probably Arizona Native Plant Society is taking the lead on this, along with government agencies. Maricopa County is extremely concerned about it. Pima County is very concerned about it. And we just need to get this under control before it spreads throughout the Tucson Basin. Next slide, please. And there is a shot somewhere. Oh, so that's South Mountain. So that's looking north at South Mountain as you're traveling up I-10 about 20 miles this side of Phoenix. And I hadn't noticed this, but I haven't driven up there in a couple of years anyway. But there's an infestation for you. And, you know, it would take hundreds of people to be dealing with this stuff. So unfortunately, again, they're spraying herbicides out there on this. But we really do need to get control of this non-native invasive species. And then one that I don't think is considered super invasive, not on a lot of people's radar for causing problems in the Tucson Basin. But as a restoration guy, I am in the washes, the arroyos, and the rivers around creeks and rivers around Tucson all the time. And I'm just seeing more and more of this African sumac. It is no longer Rhus lancea. They changed the name of it. I'll leave that to the botanist, but to me, it will always be Rhus lancea. We have native Rhuses. Lemonade berry is a Rhus. There's a little leaf Rhus. So we have native relatives of this plant. But I consider it just a terrible blight on the Tucson landscape here. And it was planted in people's backyards by landscapers for years, and it's still for sale at Home Depot and Lowe's, and has not been added to the noxious plant list. So the state of Arizona has a noxious plant list that bubblegrass and stinknet are both on, and those allow the state to actually expend that list. The plants on that list are plants that the state can expend funding on to get rid of. So this is grows into a really nice shade tree, is why it was planted everywhere. Very drought tolerant. It produces abundant seeds, and I mean a lot of seeds. However, not much wildlife use of those seeds. I don't know what it is, if there's some tannins in those seeds or what it is, but it just doesn't have wildlife value like a hackberry tree or a mesquite tree or a walnut or any of our other fruit producing, flower producing trees have. So it can be a single or multi-stemmed. It's evergreen, as I said, so great shade tree, can get up to 30 feet tall. It's graceful looking. I'm sure in Africa, I would love this tree as my shade tree in my backyard. In Tucson, Arizona, no, I don't like it. And I encourage everybody, just go ahead. Even if it's shading your house, take it down, put a replacement in there. Mesquite's a great replacement for it. If you've got gray water or roof water coming down, you could also put a hackberry in. For an evergreen, I would suggest putting in a hopseed bush. They're very skinny compared to the African sumac, but you can put a line of them in and still get that shade and the evergreen shade throughout the winter also. And they're fast growing, low water use plants also that are native to the Sonoran Desert.
And speaking of native trees. Sorry, Trevor. There's a question in the chat in relation to the African sumac. So Leaf wants to know if there are any native trees that could be easily mixed up with the African sumac.
There are not. I mean, if you look at those leaves right there, it has a kind of a willow-shaped leaf, but it doesn't look like a willow. It doesn't look like a desert willow. And again, they're evergreens where our willows are not evergreens. So if you see this in somebody's yard in the middle of the winter and it's fully green, that's a sumac. Cindy also asked, there's a full-grown one in her next door neighbors, and now it's popping up in her yard. Yes, their suckers from roots are terrible, terrible, terrible. So I cut down 2 African sumacs in my yard about 4 years ago, And then instead of using an herbicide on the cut stem, I've just been cutting it back. So within 2 weeks of cutting that, I had a small bush about 3 feet wide and 3 feet tall. Went in and chopped it all down. I took my axe and started attacking the cut of right above the ground level, and just trying to split that root open. Now, I've been doing that for 4 years now, and it's finally kind of giving up the ghost. The root ball has expended all of its energy. I don't allow it to photosynthesize by cutting its stems off immediately. And I'm finally going to see the end of that sumac in my backyard.
Definitely sounds like it takes a lot of work.
Protecting the earth takes a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a better picture of the leaves and the flowers on there. Oh, nice. Good. Thank you, Barry, for sharing that. I'll take a look at that report. And then just another close-up of the leaves. Another thing that kind of distinguishes this from other plants that have similar leaves is how waxy and thick these leaves are compared to a willow or a desert willow, a true willow or a desert willow leaf.
Sorry.
And Barry, is that the book that I want to click on it here, that was from the University of Arizona Press? Taking a look at it. It's loading, it's loading. Yes. Nice. Yeah, that looks like a great PDF. Thank you so much for sharing that. So back to this. So there's just a picture of a fully grown adult tree. And again, a good looking tree, nice and graceful looking, cool bends in the limb, you know, great shade. But again, it's really becoming an invasive species, especially in our wash systems. So number one, don't plant it. Number two, if you can get rid of it, get rid of it. Talk to your neighbors about it. Bring it up at your HOA or neighborhood association meeting that you're concerned about it. And we'll go on to the next species, Lauren.
Yeah, Colleen has a question before we do that. Does the bark look like scales? That's a great question. Unfortunately, we don't have a close-up picture of that.
Very skinny looking bark, and unfortunately, I didn't find a good picture of the bark. It's not quite as scaly as like an alligator juniper, but it's definitely kind of scaly.
Great questions. All right, any more questions about African sumac before we jump into a few other
and
different
if you think of any other questions about a plant we already talked about, put them in there anyway, and we'll answer those questions.
Yep.
Let's go to the next slide. So two other ones that are invading our riparian areas, fountain grass and arundo, or the giant reed. So let's go on to the next slide. So again, one of those African grasses. This time it wasn't brought in for cattle forage or erosion control. It was brought in for landscapes, because what a beautiful seed head and very graceful and gorgeous purplish flowers on this thing. And I mean, if you don't know, those seed heads, before they turn to seeds, they are little tiny microscopic flowers, and they're really beautiful and have a great, very light purple. And now they have different varieties that have different colored seed heads. But this is a more of a natural looking one here in the Catalinas. The bunch grass, perennial bunch grass. Again, it doesn't have a very deep root system, so they're pretty easy to dig out. Spreads aggressively by seeds. Look at how many seeds are on that grass. And we've got close-up pictures. So again, the saving grace of this thing is it does not burn as hot as the buffle grass. The buffle grass is probably the hottest burning grass that we have in the Sonoran Desert. And luckily this one does not, but it could still carry fire into the desert scrub where it doesn't belong. And again, you know, manual digging, except in some of these areas on the front range of the Catalinas where it's so steep and would be dangerous to send people, especially volunteers, clambering up these side of these mountains trying to get rid of this. They are spraying for it from helicopters, unfortunately with Roundup.
Yeah, definitely seems like a hard one to get rid of as well. Colleen mentioned that she thinks she might have that in her yard, and she asked if she should cut it off. But it definitely sounds like manual digging or definitely getting those roots out, Colleen, is the best option for this grass. And are there any native grasses that could be mistaken with fountain grass, Trevor?
There are not. It has a pretty unique seed head, so large. We don't have any of our native bunch grasses that look like that. If people, you know, people are very attached to these plants in their backyards because they are very beautiful grass. And, you know, it's not the grass's fault it's here. So I can't blame the grass, but there are, I would encourage, it kind of depends on when you purchased or when that was installed, because about 15, 20 years ago, when this was first noticed as a problem, and it was put on the noxious species list in Arizona, the nurseries started selling sterile fountain grass. So if you have one of these in your yard and you don't see it spreading, it may be one of those sterile specimens of fountain grass. But if you see it spreading, get rid of it. And some of the grasses that we plant a lot of at Watershed Management Group through our co-op program are bullgrass, which is Muhlenbergia, deergrass, another Muhlenbergia. And then there's the 4 or 5 Boutelouas that are nice bunch grasses, the grama grasses. And then there's a whole bunch of other cool looking grasses in the Sonoran Desert and desert grasslands that we use here in Tucson. Arizona cottontop, sprangletop. You know, there's more than 80 native species of bunch grasses in the Sonoran Desert and Sonoran desert grasslands. So there's a lot of options to plant besides the fountain grass. Go to the next slide.
Yes, definitely. And we have a question from Sheila as well. She's got a similar question to Leaf in relation to stinknet. Are there any low growing grasses that are similar to stinknet? She said she has something that has small yellow flowers that's taking over her front yard by the road, but they don't look exactly like the seed head that we've shown in the pictures. Is there anything that you know of, Trevor, that looks similar to stinknet?
There are some non-native weeds that aren't necessarily invasive weeds that have small yellow flowers. The flowers look more like a little sunflower or a little daisy as compared to the round flower of the stinknet. So that's really distinctive, and we don't have any other yellow flowers that look like that round stinknet flower. Yeah, Susan, I think that's a good guess on that little low growing grassy thing, Disodia. So again, just a couple pictures of it in nature there. You can, so like this picture on the left, it looks like that could be Sabino Canyon or one of the canyons. Could also be in Phoenix. I'm not recognizing the mountain range behind it, but what should be there is deergrass, Muhlenbergia rigens, which is probably the most important grass that we have growing in our washes and along our creeks. Sabino Canyon's just full of the deergrass, the Muhlenbergia. And this grass is displacing that because it has such a large seed head that it just completely overseeds what the native deergrass and other Muhlenbergias can put out there. And so it's just taking over and basically forcing our native grasses out where they're not able to survive in there. Let's go to the next slide. Arundo, Arundo, Arundo. This is something that I have been on a crusade to get rid of. A friend of mine who now sits on our board, Mark Reed, who worked for the World Wildlife Fund. He's a longtime restoration guy. out of Tucson. And he spent the last 15 years trying to get rid of this plant along the Rio Grande and Rio Bravo in Texas and Mexico, Coahuila. And it just had completely choked out all of the cottonwood willow habitat along the Rio Grande. And it was nothing but a monoculture of the giant reed for hundreds and hundreds of miles. And through a binational project, they've actually put a big dent into those populations along the Rio Grande and Rio Bravo. Unfortunately, again, they've been using fire. When it dries out, it is very fire prone, but then they've also had to use herbicides to control it along there. It was so thick that hand removal was never going to work. So it's native to the greater Middle East, all over the Middle East, dense stands and wetlands and riparian habitats, and definitely outcompetes all our native vegetation. It actually transpires about twice as much water out of a riparian area than even a cottonwood or a giant willow do. So it's not only is it outcompeting our native riparian vegetation, it's taking water from our native riparian vegetation. Can grow up to 33 feet tall. They're just amazing stands of these things. It has hollow stems about 1 inch in diameter, looks very close to like bamboo. And then again, control by hand, machine digging, or aquatic approved herbicides. We had a grant in last year, the Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management. They have an invasive plant grant program. And we had proposed a big project along the Tanque Verde because it's very prevalent along the Tanque Verde. And then there's isolated patches all throughout the Rito, the Pantano, and the Canada del Oro systems, and even a bit in the dry portions of the Santa Cruz, and then a bunch up on the wet portions near Marana. It hasn't gotten a toehold yet in the new Heritage Project in downtown Tucson where the water's flowing, but we need to be vigilant down there. And there is a bunch of buffle grass along that stretch in downtown Tucson. Anyway, we had estimated how much Arundo was in the Tanque Verde, and that wasn't good enough for the funders. So they said, come back next year, get a better grip on exactly how much is out there, and we'll fund you this year. So that funding opportunity will come back up in June. And I have full confidence that we'll get funding to take care of this along the Tanque Verde. It really is the only place where it has a foothold, and it is damaging our riparian habitat. Right there at Wentworth Road at Tanque Verde, an area that flows about 9 months out of the year right there, it is just taken over. And the way we had proposed to do this work was to hire contractors with backhoes to come in and dig it out, and then have volunteer events on Saturday mornings to go out and pick up all the pieces, bag them up, get all of the Arundo out of the floodplain and let it dry out, and then mulch it. And you just use it as mulch or just go straight to the dump with it in giant roll-offs. But again, they said no to the funding request because we didn't know exactly how much was out there. We just said, we've got this 10-mile stretch of the Tanque Verde, we're going to treat it. And they wanted to know exactly how many acres. So for the last 2 semesters, Lexi Culp, one of our interns here at Watershed Management Group for the U of A, has been out mapping all these locations on the Tanque Verde. So she just finished up this past weekend, and now we have a map and we know exactly how much Arundo is out there. So like I said, we feel comfortable that we'll be able to get some funding to take care of it out there. We also had a great partnership set up. There's a professor from the U of A who now works at Pima College. He lives along Sabino. He's been working to get rid of it along Sabino Creek for the past 15 years, and it's gone from that system. He's now started on his own, where he just goes out with a small group of his friends on Saturdays and Sundays and attacks these isolated stands. And then also partnering with the Tucson Audubon Society because they have concerns about this taking over some of our very, very important bird habitat in our riparian systems. So we're going to use their invasive species crew to help us with this. So I hope by next winter, we'll be having volunteer events along the Tanque Verde to remove this plant. Go to the next slide, please.
Yes, and we definitely hope to see you all at those volunteer events as well, especially learning about how terrible this invasive plant can be. So it's just incredible work that Lexi has been doing, and we're so happy to have a little bit of a hopeful story, even though this invasive is definitely everywhere in the Tanque Verde.
So just a picture of what the plant looks like on the ground. I had to take all the pictures off of my computer because I was running out of disk space and my computer wouldn't start up. So I didn't have any pictures that I had taken in the Tanque Verde. They're all on a disk drive. But so I just found this one on the web. This is kind of a small stand of this. So you can imagine kind of the effort it would take to go in, chop it all down with a machete, and then dig out the root balls. The other thing about this, it does spread rhizomally. So if a little tiny, and this is how it operates in nature, is it gets bent down by a flood because it's right in the channel bottom, gets bent down by a flood, a piece breaks off, flows downstream, it's a little bit wet, it puts roots down and starts a whole new stand of it. So when we go in and do this, we'll chop that down, hand dig it, or use a backhoe to dig it out. And then the most important part of this will be with the volunteers to go in and pick up all the little pieces and bag them and get them out of there. It can be done. It's been done. California has a real issue with this, and there's just tons of documentation on methods and successes and failures coming out of California and now out of the Rio Grande with the World Wildlife Fund's work down there. Let's go to the next slide. That kind of gives you an idea right there how big these stands can be. So I don't even know where they're getting at this picture off the web. He looks like a Park Service guy or a Forest Service guy. There's a road to the left. So I don't know where this is taken, probably California, but there must be a riparian area right on the other side of that stand. But it just kind of gives you an idea of how thick this can get and why it would completely smother and not allow any of our native riparian vegetation to grow in there.
Oh, no, it's me.
It's okay,
Awesome.
Lauren. I'm done, and I'll answer any. But Lauren's got something for you right now. We're very excited about our new t-shirts.
Yes, unfortunately, I don't have a photo of our new t-shirts on this slide, but I hope that you all are as excited about taking action as I am, hearing about all of these different plants that we can remove from our local areas. So one of the things that we have been doing throughout this time that we can't get together is take action events that are dispersed events. And so when you take action by participating this Saturday, by going out in your local area and removing invasive plants, some that we've talked about today or any that you are aware of on your own. So for those of you who have seen them in your yard, this is an opportunity for you. And those who are able to explore their local areas a little bit more, this is an opportunity for you all as well. But these plants are everywhere in our city, and they could be in your own backyards, like I just was mentioning. So we definitely all have an opportunity to work together, but separately, to help these, to keep these plants out of our city. And so if you take action, you send us a photo and a description of what you did and where, you'll win a River Run Network t-shirt. And so I hope that you all can spend some Earth Day time to take action in your own neighborhoods. Let me grab that link for you. I can stop doing this. So here is the link to sign up to take action. So there's going to be, I think we've got about 20 or so people signed up for this event already, which is great. So I'm super excited to see all of the photos and all of the work you all are able to do. But It's reloading. So our take action events, like I've mentioned, are just a chance for you all to get out and use the knowledge that Trevor has given you all today to go out and take action and get these plants out of our local areas and just make our watershed a little bit better. And it's definitely not something one individual can do. It's definitely a team effort. So we're really happy to have you all here today to learn about this and to do something about it.
You know, and every time we do this, the herbicide question comes up, and it's such a shame that we have to turn to such a nasty thing as the glyphosate. So really kind of, I guess my closing message on that is, if we can deal with this when they're small, when we have small infestations, and we can get rid of it out of our neighborhoods and our empty lots and along our washes by hand before it gets out of control, then we preclude the use of those herbicides. So the more we can do by hand, the less the government is going to come in and start spraying herbicides all over the Tucson Basin. So I hope folks can get out, join those buffalo grass pulls, join us when we start our Arundo work. Keep an eye on that Stinknet. And you know, the most invasive, dangerous species ever to be introduced in the Tucson Basin were humans. The second was cows. And then we have these darn plant species. We've got a bunch of non-native aquatic species such as bullfrogs and non-native fish. So we are just swimming it in. We need to get control of this stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I also wanted to see with another poll question, how many of you all are already planning to get out and take action this weekend? So I'll let you all fill that out. And after this, we've also got some more.
Did you mention what we're doing with the Triple Crown folks next month?
I did not. Do you want to talk about it?
Sure. So for last year, our Triple Crown event, I wouldn't call them winners, but participants, folks who did do the 3 take action events and shared their stories and their pictures with us, we took them down to the San Pedro and did an organized Beaver Survey. And we broke up into 3 teams, all mass, small teams of 4. I had a very dry section of the San Pedro, but we saw beaver sign. Lauren was in a wetter section of the San Pedro. And actually, I think you saw a dam, right? An active dam.
Mm-hmm.
And then so this year, next month, over 2 Saturdays, we're going to take the folks who complete their 3 actions and share with us. We're going to take them down to Cienega Creek down in the Sonoran Valley and visit the site where the BLM is planning on reintroducing beavers into the Santa Cruz River watershed. So very exciting stuff and a great hike. One of my favorite places to hike in the world is down there where those beavers will be put.
Yeah. And that, like Trevor mentioned, is if you participate in 3 different take action events. And so we've got this one and a few other ones coming up. So you can find those events on our website and sign up to take action. And when you take a photo of what you've done and send it in to us, that's when you qualify to win the Triple Crown if you do that for 3 different events. And it looks like we've got a few questions in the chat, Trevor, if you would like to jump into that. So we can definitely jump into our Q&A session. We've got about 3 minutes left until 1 o'clock. But those of you who have questions, you are welcome to stay on. So Trevor, if you want to answer Mike's question, and I will move ahead with some of the other resources that we have for you all and post them in the chat for you.
So Mike asked, for empty lots with invasive seed loads, is there any pre-treatment possible before construction activity to reduce spread? There is, and there isn't. So you could go in and spray a pre-emergent. There are ordinances, both county and city, about spreading non-native invasive species around, and there are pretty stringent site constraints that they put on construction sites, such as the using they're not called baffles. I'm forgetting what they call to control sediment, so it's not washing off the site and taking invasive seeds that have been stirred up off the site, and also just keeps dirt off of the roadways. They also have to have everything should be weed-free fill dirt. They're supposedly cleaning the undercarriages of their machines and their vehicles before and after each job. But I think quite a few, if they suspect that there's an invasive seed load, they do go in with pre-emergent and spray before they start ground disturbing activities.
Great. And then Colleen has a question about sumac trees, if all sumac trees are invasive.
So our native sumacs are not trees, they're more shrubs. They can get pretty large shrubs, so lemonade berry, rus trilobata. There's a little leaf sumac, and I'm forgetting what it's called. These are all available at our local nurseries, and I'm not talking Lowe's. I mean, they may be at Lowe's and Home Depot, but you know, we really want to promote folks like Desert Survivors, who uses developmentally disabled adults and trains them in nursery skills, and just has a wonderful greenhouse and nursery and selection of plants. And then we've also been, we really love the folks over at Spadefoot Nursery. Petey Mesquite's daughter, Katie, and her partner, Jared. Great folks, great plants, really cool stuff. So, you know, go buy your ruses from them and you'll get, oh, Sue, I forgot to, yes, and Sue is part of the Great Old Broads for Wilderness, and I love the Great Old Broads. I'm actually a Great Old Bro. I've been adopted by the Great Old Broads. I led the Great Old Broads at a trip into the Chiricahua Mountains about 15 years ago for 10 days where we mapped wilderness boundaries. So yes, we want to get involved with the Great Old Broads. So I will reach out to you, Sue. I totally forgot to respond to your email. Apologies for that.
Awesome.
And so some other folks, I mentioned the Desert Museum. They're just doing a wonderful job. The Sonoran Desert Weed Whackers, Arizona Native Plant Society. Check them out. There's just tons of opportunities to get involved. And the nice thing about going out with these folks is you're not just learning about the invasive species, you're also out in nature. And so what's that plant? Somebody there will know what that plant is, you know, and all these different types of things, tons of critters out there you'll see. So just a great way to get outside and do some good.
Definitely. And we did have a question from Stephanie. So if we see invasive species, should we try to move them or should we report them? And I think that's really based on how much you see. So with our Take Action event, like I mentioned, Stephanie, we definitely want to encourage you all to use the knowledge that we've given you. But if it's super overwhelming or if you're not totally sure, you can definitely do a little bit more research and leave it there and or report it to the city and the county to ensure that it is removed properly and to the fullest extent that it can be. But we definitely encourage you to use that knowledge, especially in your own local area where you can definitely make a difference with the populations of these invasive plants.
And I would also suggest to reach out to your neighborhood association if you suspect that there's a non-native invasive species, because there might be somebody in the neighborhood who's very active in this sort of stuff. So in my neighborhood, the Broadmoor is a great guy that if I say, can you check this out, go look at this, because I'm not a plant guy, I'm a herpetologist, I'm a frog guy. So I'm not always sure about these plants. Richard Rohde would know about it, so I would always contact him. So I'd put it out there to your neighborhood association too. And then again, if it's on public property, go ahead and report it to either the city or the county, depending on where you are.
Awesome. Well, if there are any other questions, you're definitely welcome to put them in the chat or unmute and ask them. But it is about 1:03, so we thank you all for your time. I hope that you are able to use the knowledge that you've gained here today. And we hope to hear all about how you all were able to take action.